Hey everybody, Adam Tereska Videos. I'm in Taylor, Pennsylvania. We're going to the Lackawanna Coal Mine Tour. I'm going to be joining JP Videos, RJ78 Productions, and Laura, and anybody else who might be there that I don't know about. We're going to do the tour, check it out, have a good time. Inviting you to join us and see what there is to offer. It'll be my first time doing the actual tour itself. I did the exterior tour with RJ, but I haven't gotten to go inside yet. So, we're going to go do that today and have ourselves some fun. We'll see you there. You can see the cable. Moving. Bringing cars out of the tunnel here. Da, 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 da. How about that, huh? Is that neat or what? Good stuff. We got people in the mine car. They got people that got their masks on. They got their helmets on. It looks like they're getting ready to go down into the mine. We got the hoist house right up there. And here you can see the mine cars going down into the mine right now, heading back in. We go down 300 feet. Later on we'll be doing our turn down there. Gonna have ourselves a good time. Going uphill, so bear with me here. Your coal mining platform right there. Up there is the Anthracite Heritage Museum. I'm sure we'll be going in there soon enough. This would be the coal mine tour building. There's the tipple, some railroad, some mine cars, and various remnants. And I'll take you up close and personal to those in a little bit. While we're waiting for the tour, I'm going to show you some of the stuff here that's mine related you can check out. This is like some sort of a hoist, like a rolling hoist. You see some of the anchor points they have here. Look at the thickness of the I-beam. There's one of the coal cars. Got a lot of coal there, looks like bituminous. Bituminous, excuse me, bituminous. And this is the Lackawanna Coal Mine Tour building. This is where you get your tickets for the tour. You got the souvenir shop in there. They got a snack bar. And over here we got some more remnants. Unfortunately, these signs are very bad. Oh, there's a firefighting equipment here in this part here. barely even got the sign, but you get your firefighting equipment right here. You got the motors for the hoist room here. I believe there's a hoist room motor. Back up so you can see it better. And get more of the cars that go into the mine down here. More motors for the down in the mines. Trying to read what this one here is. More equipment right there. I'm not sure what that's called. Quite interesting. And here you have your dynamite magazine and cap house. This sign's actually readable. You can see what this one says. And as our tour gets closer, see some more of the equipment. I'm not sure what it's called, but and right over toward the tipple real quick. Set the tracks here. We'll Y up into 1 to go into the tipple building itself. Here you can see some of the ties for the tracks. You got some more cars here for various jobs and duties. More coal here in this one. I'm guessing these would be like supply carts over here. And here's a nice close-up of the tipple. I'll show you the sign for it in a minute. Never walk on your rails because they're a slip hazard. It goes up, and they have other equipment here as well, such as this old steam shovel. It's been out in the weather for a long time. Would be nice to restore, but it's probably not able to be restored at this point in time. Probably not able to get parts for it or something like that. But it does make great yard art. And we have some examples over here. That's other componentry. You got the shaker chute, the conveyor or miner's jalopy, and the packing machine. Starting from here, this would be the packing machine, and this is the miner's jalopy, as they called it. Such a beautiful area here. Very tranquil. Very enjoyable. In a little bit we're going to go down in the mine itself, and we will be checking what it's like 300 feet down. See you in a bit. Okay. I'm with JP Videos, RJ78 Productions, and Laura, and we are now. Old school motorcycle style helmet look there with the helmets on backwards. And it looks like we're gonna head right up into the hoist room. The hoist house, as they call it. Or, no, we're gonna be waiting to get on the hoist car to head down. And there's our limo into the mine. Getting ready to open up the doors here for us to get us in, and we're going to be heading into the mine momentarily. You'll see you 300 feet below.
Did you bring a flashlight?
Yes.
We're inside the hoist car, heading into the mine.
Wow! Look at how small the tracks are compared to a railroad track. Here we go!
Here we go.
All aboard! Hang on. Don't worry, she'll hang on to you now. Oh! Oh! I'm going to be in this guy's lap if I keep on sliding down. Oh, I can't. Yeah, there's a little bit of light.
Oh my god, it's so dark.
We're making our descent inside of the mine right now.
They're trying to make it.
We'll be 300 feet underground.
Okay, like it was in the days of the miner.
And as you can see, it's barely visible at all.
I mean, it's dark.
There's light down here, you'll see.
Quite a steep drop as we go down.
But I thought it was supposed to be a mine cart and the thing was open, but they had hard hats to protect themselves.
Smells like a musty old dog.
Top of it's so hot.
Huh?
Temperature's dropping, which is not surprising for these mines.
Heck yeah. Ah! Yeah,
A nice little steep slope there, and so you got some lights down there. When we look back out the side, and now you can see something because of the lights where we're at now.
I hear water.
But
Nice snow water.
once we get down to where we get out of the car here, we'll continue on the video. Okay, we're now down in the mine. We got what they call the foot shanty. Basically, it's like a office, first aid station, something like that. And we were heading up here for the tour. This gives you an idea of what the mine map would be, for lack of a better term. And right above that is how the mine is ventilated.
Oh, that's right. You got to get the dirt about that. Get no Wi-Fi enough.
An idea what everything's like here.
You can see the boards. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Lackawanna Coal Mine Tour. My name's Tony. I'll be your guide through the mine. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Okay, the little yellow bus that brought us down the slope, 1,300 feet. We're standing here in the Clark Gangway. You're approximately 300 feet underground. Now, if you look at the lower board, you'll see that when coal was formed, it was sandwiched between layers of rock, following the contour of the valley. When the Continental Coal Company began its operations back on February 15, 1860, they began by sinking a shaft through the coal seams. A typical shaft usually consisted of two compartments. One in which loaded mine cars were pushed into cages and hoisted to the surface, and another in which the empties were lowered in a similar fashion. If the shaft passed through several coal seams, landings were constructed at each level so that the loaded mine cars can be pushed into cages and hoisted to the surface. As you can see, the deepest seam is over 500 feet deep. That put the bulk of this coal beneath the water table. So deep mining was not made possible until after 1850, when the coal companies harnessed the steam engines to the mine pumps. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, large pumps were used to water the mines so that the miners can get into the deep seams and extract the coal. For every ton of coal brought to the surface in the 1920s, over 10.5 tons of water had to be pumped out of the mines. In November 1960, the Pennsylvania Coal Company turned off the last of her deep mine pumps here in the Lackawanna Basin. This caused the underground mine water to rise, forcing rivers of water out of mine seeps and mine entrances, flooding several basements and threatening over 200 homes on the lower end of the valley with the rainless flood. To ease the flood threat, the Pennsylvania Department of Mines drilled a 42-inch diameter borehole into the old red-ash seam of the abandoned Pennsylvania Coal Company works beneath the Lackawanna River, down here in Old Forge, which is about 6 miles down the road. Between 40 and 100 million gallons of acid mine water, along with over 7,700 pounds of iron oxide per day, are discharged through this outlet, keeping the level of water in this mine, shown by the red line here, approximately 135 feet below us. Now, when the Mountain Coal Company developed the 190 slope, they developed it to this point so that they could extract the coal above the water level. Now, if you focus your attention to the upper board, you'll see an illustration of what's called pillar and chamber mining. This was the most common method of mining here in the northern fields. All mines were first developed by driving a gangway through the mine, which is the main highway. The gangways were driven as level as conditions would permit. As near perpendicular to the gangways, the chambers were driven, following the rise of the seam. The chambers were driven either to the surface or to a previously mined gangway. Each of these chambers were separated by pillars of coal of varying thickness according to the weight and the character of the overlying strata. Each of these pillars of coal were pierced at regular intervals by small tunnels called crosscuts. And this is how they circulate a fresh air from chamber to chamber. The wooden timbers you see in front of you and throughout the mine are strong enough to hold the enormous weight of the rock and the coal above us. The roof is actually held up by the pillars of coal that were left behind. But these pillars do have a purpose. If there was any movement in the top rock and what miners would call squeeze, poles would begin to bend and make cracking and popping noises, and that was the miners' signal to get out of the area. The miners had a saying, if the pillars are talking, the miners are walking. Now as mining progressed and new chambers were driven, the old chambers were sealed off by stoppings, which are shown by the red lines here. Stoppings were simply air walls. If they were of a permanent nature, they were made of masonry construction. If they were of a temporary nature, they were made of suitable materials to effectively channel airflow deeper into the workings. Ventilation in this mine is by intake air, comes down through the slope, circulates throughout the mine, makes its way to the second opening where there's a fan to facilitate air circulation. Since I have the light, I will always be in the lead. We ask that you don't stray or straggle. If you have cameras, you're welcome to take pictures of the mine itself you wish. We just ask that you refrain from taking pictures of anybody in this assembly, especially children, unless they're members of your party or part of your group. If you don't get the picture on the way in, let me know. We'll get the picture on the way out. Okay, if you want to follow me. Okay, here we have the chamber. This chamber shoots 300 feet down to the gangway below us. When this chamber was driven, it was driven from the lower gangway up.
Mommy, Mommy, are those eggs? I want to know what those whites eggs.
That must be down and you can turn left or right.
That's why I called mine.
Our tour guide was saying this is called chamber mining. You have the horizontal one here. You have the vertical one here. And it went from the bottom upward.
To match the coal seam. The chamber was usually worked by two men, the miner and his laborer. The miner was in control of this chamber. He was responsible for its safety and its direction of work. Now, if you look at my light, you're going to see a large piece of coal there. That's part of the pillar system that's holding the roof above us. If you continue to follow my light, you're going to see a little tunnel and a chamber behind it. This is part of the crosscut system by which they circulate a fresh air from chamber to chamber. Does everybody see that? Okay. Follow me. If you look at my light, you're going to see a crossing in the track. It's above the boards, painted in fluorescent orange. It poses a trip hazard, so please be aware of this hazard as we make our way into and out of the mining equipment area. Just want to get against the boards there. Yeah, you're good. Just get against the wall here. We're going to look at the equipment. Okay, mules were the mainstay in the mine haulage system for over a century. When they brought electricity into the mine, they ran a bare wire cable along the roof of the mine, and they introduced the electric locomotive, which they dubbed the electric mule. The electric mule made it much easier to haul more tonnage of coal through the mine, but that bare wire cable along the roof of the mine there posed a hazard. The line was always energized. There's always water in the mine, sometimes ankle deep. So if a mine worker happened to be walking along the tracks, he tripped, he reached up to hit that cable, he could get electrocuted. Behind the electric locomotive, you'll see what's called the man trip car. This is how the miners were lowered into the mine and extracted from the mine in a slope operation. You'll note that the seats that served as, or the planks that served as their seats are pitched. The pitch matched the inclination of the slope, so that when they made their trips in and out, they were actually sitting in the upright position. Now, as the mines modernized, they introduced the telephone. And how the telephone worked, there was a series of rings to the different sections of the mine and the buildings on the surface that had a phone. So, for example, if we wanted to call the hoist house and the signal was 3 rings, we would simply pick up our earpiece and crank this 3 times. They would pick up their earpiece and we would be able to communicate with the hoist house. But you had to remember that this was a party line system, meaning anyone in a different section of the mine or a building on the surface where a phone was located could easily pick up their earpiece and listen in on your conversation. So you never badmouthed a fellow mine worker, because that mine worker could be your boss and there'd be one heck of a price to pay later. Can we move down a bit so everybody can get in here and see? Okay, in the very early days of mining, many miners were losing their lives in explosions and from suffocation. There are 2 main toxic gases in the mine. Methane, which is contained in pockets in the coal itself. That gas is lighter than air and it accumulates near the roof and is very, very volatile. We also have carbon dioxide, which is a byproduct of our breath. It also naturally occurs in the atmosphere. That gas is heavier than air. It pools near the floor and could easily suffocate a mine worker. This is what's called a permissible flame safety lamp, and this is what's used to detect those gases. The first safety lamp was invented over in England in 1815 by English scientist Sir Humphrey Davy. In 1871, there was a French inventor by the name of Marceau who made several improvements to the Davy lamp. There are only 2 permissible flame safety lamps allowed in the American mines, and they are the Wolf and the Kohler. And they are directly related to the Marceau design and construction. Now, if the miner wanted to check for methane, he would raise the lantern near the ceiling. If the flame elongated and had a blue coat writing on it, that told him the gas was present. He would slowly lower the lantern, as he did not want the elongated flame making its way up into the bonnet. Check for carbon dioxide, he would drop the lamp near the floor. If the flame grew dim, that told him the gas was present. If either of these gases were present, the chamber would have to be ventilated before the miner can continue working in that chamber. Now there was a third gas in the mine, carbon monoxide, the byproduct of the explosives they used, a mine fire, or a fire on the surface where the smoke made its way underground. That gas was not detectable by the flame safety lamp. So if you look up here, you'll see that in the early 1900s, miners began bringing canaries into the mine to check it for carbon monoxide. Canaries were used because they were very active birds. They were always singing, and they had a complex unidirectional flow-through respiratory system, the efficiency of which exposed the bird to the toxic effect of the gas far quicker than a human could experience it. So if a miner was working his chamber, noticed the bird very sluggish or it wasn't singing, that was his signal the gas was present, and the chamber would have to be ventilated before anyone can continue working within that chamber. Now anthracite is a hard coal. It cannot be mined with machinery. You have to drill a hole into the face of the seam, pack it with explosives, and blast it out. In the very early days, the miner would put this chest drill against his chest, push against it with all his strength, crank the auger. If it was an extremely hard seam of coal, they would bring in a second miner to push against the first miner to provide additional force to the drill. Now when electricity made its way underground, they brought the electric drill down. Made it much easier to drill the hole, but it took 2 miners to operate because it was heavy, and it had a couple of hazards. There's always water in the mine, so there's always the chance of getting a shock or even possibly electrocuted. Also, if there was any methane in the chamber, the spark from the armature could easily ignite the gas. Now once the miner had the required number of holes drilled to blow out the particular seam he was working on, in the very early days they were using black powder. Black powder was the primary blasting agent up until around 1917. The miner would have a cardboard tube. One end would be collapsed. He would pour the powder into the tube, collapse the opposite end, and with the long, slender steel rod called a miner's needle, he would insert the tube into the hole, and with the miner's needle, push the cardboard cartridge to the bottom of the hole. He would then leave the miner's needle in place, get all the damp drill shavings from the floor, pack the hole tight, carefully withdraw the miner's needle. He would then insert a split fuse, light the fuse, and hope he got around the corner before the fuse hit the powder. Due to the high number of mine worker fatalities in the late 1800s and early 1900s from premature explosions, pressure was put on the Department of Mines to try to eliminate black powder as the primary blasting agent in coal mines. This resulted in the testing and development of safer explosives called permissible explosives, which dramatically cut down the number of deaths from premature explosions. Now, if you look to your right here, you'll see that our miners in the 1940s began using pneumatic tools to power their drilling equipment. Once the miners had the required number of holes drilled to blast out the particular seam they were working on, they would pack the holes with dynamite. They would wire all the shots together, connect the shots to the dynamite, or to the cable, and run the cable a safe distance down the gangway to where they had the plunger situated. Now, many miners felt safer crawling into the little crosscut holes, as coal dust from explosions can come down the gangway 60 to 70 miles an hour. Once everything was in readiness, the miner would yell fire, 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 fire real loud, several different directions, to let the other miners know there's an impending explosion. He would pick up his handle, push it down. If he had planted 10 shots, he wanted to hear 10 successive explosions. If he only heard 8, that told him he had 2 misfires. He would immediately disconnect the wires, wait 30 to 40 minutes before he came back into the chamber. When he came back into the chamber, he would locate the misfired shot, stick his hook into the hole, pulling the shot out, hoping it doesn't explode on the way out. He would then have to repack the holes where the misfires occurred with explosives and blow out the remaining chunks of coal. Okay, if you want to step back and let me get ahead, if anybody wants to take pictures down here, you're welcome to. I'll wait for you back here.
Here you can see the mannequins with the pneumatic tools drilling in to make their holes for their dynamite so that they can blast the anthracite coal out. The safety lanterns, which tell you about the carbon dioxide and the methane. Here's your dynamite plunger. Here's the lantern. Safety lantern.
Mommy, you want to take a picture of that bird?
The canaries. The pneumatic drills.
Mom, we can take a picture of that.
Your generator system.
I know.
Your conveyor for the coal.
Can we see the first one?
This is the man car. Your overhead hoist. And this is the electric engine that powered it. And this is the cable. This is the overhead cable he was discussing.
Here, so you don't trip, okay, buddy?
Wait, why are we going this way? Mommy, what's that say, Mama? It's just still driving. Maybe we can come back to mine and see what that says.
Continuing down the pathway here. Go to the next segment of the tour.
The guy who wheeled through the mine was a young boy, 11 or 12 years old. This was usually his second job underground. Mules were used because of their strength and their sure-footedness,
It's so
and they were
cold.
less susceptible to disease than horses.
Go in.
In the morning, when the boy would go into the mule barn to get his mule, he had to have snacks. Apples and chewing tobacco. His mules were usually stubborn. And these mules chewed tobacco much like the mine workers did, I guess, to keep the coal dust out of their throats. Now on the boy's cap, you note that he's got a carbide gas lamp. They came into general use around 1910, and they were an improvement over the old oil wig lamps. Flame burned brighter and cleaner, and it's fair to avoid the smoke and the soot of the old oil wig lamp. However, it was still hazardous. If he was leading a trip through the mine, and he walked into a pocket of methane, the open flame could easily ignite the gas. Now in his hand, you see he's got a sprag stick. These are what was used to stop or slow the car if they did not have any brakes. So all along the route, especially at intersections, there'd be stacks of sprag sticks. The boy needed to stop or slow the car, which was a very dangerous maneuver in the dark tunnel. He walked back to the car and attempted to jam the stick into the focus of the wheel. Even in the early days, these fully loaded cars weighed over 3,600 pounds. They could easily snap the stick, injuring the boy. And in the early days of mining, there were no antibiotics that we now have to prevent infections from setting in from any type of injury the boy may have suffered.
Mommy, look how clean. Mommy, look at that clean. Mommy, look how
Okay, what we have here is called a fault. The anthracite coal fields of eastern Pennsylvania are heavily and intricately faulted. These faults can run anywhere from 20 feet in length to 1,000 feet in length, and this one runs roughly 250 feet back. These faults were created during one of our early geological periods when the crust of the earth began a movement excuse me, that folded and faulted the rocks as if they were being crushed by a titanic hand. The rocks on the eastern part of the state are more heavily faulted and folded than they are in the western part of the state. That's why your anthracite coal seams run at steep inclines versus your bituminous seams in the western part of the state that run fairly level.
With the modern lights, you can't appreciate how these miners had to work in the day. Such dangerous occupation.
I wonder when you come out of there, they had to have 5-6 shots in about 5-6 years just to watch the stuff come. Huh? Oh, no, I don't know somebody that helped.
Okay, what we have here is called the peg shanty. This was the underground office of the mine foreman, and it gets its name from the pegboard that's on the outside of the door. It was by the position of the wooden peg next to the name that the mine foreman knew who was working his section and who was out of his section. The mine foreman was in charge of general supervision of the section. He was responsible for its safety and the steady production of coal. Okay, if you look up ahead, you can see that there's a lot of areas where the top rock is hanging low. If you look down on the ground, you're going to see that there's several crossings in the track. The boards are wet and extremely slippery. So from this point on, be mindful of your headroom, and also please be mindful of your forward path.
They're showing some nature's carpet here in the mine. And we're also getting information of safety with the rails in a low headway. I can't see if there's a bench here.
Okay, what we have here is one of the Dunmore beds. You can see that the seam is only about 3 feet high, and it's nicknamed the monkey vein. The reason it's called the monkey vein is the miners had to crawl in on all fours and work in some very uncomfortable positions throughout their shift. To protect their knees from the sharp rocks, as they crawled in, they had these rubber knee pads that they would strap around their knees. Now, once the miner had the coal all blasted free, him and his laborer would crawl back into the chamber. They would pull these chutes up about 100 pounds apiece, connect them together, load the coal onto the chute. This is called a shaker chute. Once the motor was turned on, the chute would vibrate, sending the coal down to the waiting coal car. As the coal was descending the chute, all the dust from the coal, along with all the dust that the chute stirred up from the floor of the chamber, became airborne, making it extremely difficult for the miners to see and the miners to breathe. Now, if you have cameras and you want a good shot right up into the chamber, go right up to the boards there, take your picture, step back, and give the other person an opportunity.
Go ahead, Simon, take a picture. Go ahead.
There's that chute he was talking about. I don't know if you can see it or not. There we go. There's a good shot of it. These are the knee pads they used to keep from cutting up their knees. And here's a different angle. You can see the two mannequins. They had to crawl like that because this vein is only 3 feet tall. If you're claustrophobic, this is not your job.
Yeah, you're going through a very little portion of it. Actually, when we did the dynamite demonstration, I don't know if, how many people are from the area, but you could have walked the Montage Mountain if the roof didn't collapse, and if the tunnels weren't flooded, you could walk the 28 miles up to Forest City.
Wow.
All right.
Amazing, isn't it? Going into the doorways, we'll see what's coming up next. Looks like somebody's having lunch.
A little bit more so the roof in.
I don't know if you can see it.
Doesn't matter. It's cold. You want some ice cream?
Tyler, take a picture of the nipper.
Can you move just a bit more, please?
Come on in, people.
Look at this, guys.
Okay, whenever they had to put access doors between the intake and return airways in the mine, they put them in pairs to create an airlock. Inside the airlock was a young boy, 8 or 9 years old, and this was usually his first job underground. His job was to ensure these heavy wooden doors remain tightly closed, only to be opened to allow a trip in. Even though state law mandated you must be 12 years old to work underground, this law was disregarded in many cases, as these young boys were probably the sole breadwinners for the family, and it was a source of cheap labor for the coal companies. Now the boys had to listen very, very carefully, because the only signal they had that the cars were coming through were the rumblings of the car on the outside of the door. Once they heard the rumblings of the car on the outside of the door, they would open one set of doors, allow the trip into the lock, close that set of doors, run to the second set of doors, open it up, allow the trip to continue through, close that set of doors. Now on the boy's cap, unfortunately the light is out. You'll see he's got the old oil wick lamp as his light. The flame on the old oil wick lamp burned as bright as a single candle on your birthday cake in a dark room. And it gave off a lot of smoke and a lot of soot. If it happened to be a slow day in the mine, the smoke and the soot could easily put the boy to sleep. The boy fell asleep. He didn't hear the rumblings of the car on the outside of the door. They could come crashing through the door, pinning the boy against the narrow passageway. Now on the boy's lap, you see he's got a typical miner's lunchbox made of metal, and that was to protect the food from the rats that patrol the mine. But the nipper boy, he would bring scraps of food from home to feed the rats. Fed the rats for a couple of reasons. One, he wanted to befriend the rat, because if bitten, the rat could easily cause his death. Secondly, rats had a keen sense of smell and a keen sense of hearing. If he was sitting here in his airlock and he noticed a pack of rats squeezing under that set of doors, running through his airlock, and squeezing under that set of doors, that was his signal. They had sensed something wrong in this section of the gangway. He would immediately stop all trips from coming through and alert the mine foreman by whatever means he had available to him to do an inspection in that section of the gangway before allowing any trips to continue through. Rats were kind of like the mine workers' best friends, and they played a key role in their survival underground.
Great job.
9 years old.
Okay. Remember, close the door behind you.
So you're making me a nipper now?
That little airway there, that little passageway we were in there was operated by a 9-year-old who made sure the doors were open on both ends.
Is this the cars from up the surface?
See what it said?
The last person to close that door, please.
There's people there still.
So their tour guide has fixed.
Okay, here we have the second opening in the mine. This steel casing runs all the way up to the surface. Offset from this casing is a fan bringing 22,000 cubic feet of fresh air a minute into the mine. If you look inside the casing, you can see how powerful the fan is. It is trying to pull all the droplets of water upward. This casing also has another purpose. If we were unable to get out of the mine by the car that brought us down, there's a steel cage up top. They would drop it down and take us out one or two at a time, much like they did the Chilean miners several years ago.
Shaft deck is sucking water up through it. That's a secondary way of getting out here as an emergency exit. see, maybe you can't see this, but the mine roof is actually, mine ceiling I should say, is actually leaning in that direction. Wood is used for temporary stopping. Block is used for permanent stopping.
How is capacity?
The miner and his laborer had the car filled. The miner had a brass tag with his number on. He would attach it to the end of the car. The car would be pulled up to the tipple tower where there was an inspector, which the miners dubbed the docking boss. The inspector's job was to ensure that the car was filled to capacity with clean coal and pure coal. If the car was not at capacity or contained any impure coal, there would be a deduction in the miner's paycheck. Once the inspection was done, the brass tag removed and the miner's number entered into the pay book. Now, in the early days, the miner had to pay the laborer out of his own pocket. And the scale of settlement in 1900 was that the laborer was entitled to 1/3 the gross earnings of the miner, which equated to the laborer getting $2 a day for helping the miner fill 6 cars between 70 and 140 cubic feet. Now, if the laborer wanted to advance and become a certified miner, he would have to appear in person before the miner's examining committee of the particular county he was working in, and meet 2 requirements. The first requirement was he would have to have a certified miner attest on his behalf that he worked at least 2 years underground at the coal face. The second requirement was he would have to take a 12-question test in the English language on the practices and duties of cutting coal. Between 1870 and 1914, the demand for anthracite rose from 14 million ton to over 91 million ton. There was little mechanization in the American mines prior to World War I, so the expansion of production was contingent on the ever-increasing number of immigrants coming over from Eastern and Southern Europe to work in the coal mines. By 1914, there were 27 different nationalities living and working in the coal fields of Eastern Pennsylvania.
They sort the watch down here. They sort the watch down here, like I'm thinking like if you were conducted, because your coal wasn't, would you get rid of the waste rocks?
Right, what they would call that gob rock.
See why it's so cold out
When they
here.
blasted
The
out
sun
the
is
sea,
way.
the coal,
What?
the edge of the sheet, there would be a little bit of rock on that. They would have to split that out.
That's right.
They would roll the rock into. Okay, now everybody can feel the cold air hitting them in the faces. This is how the ventilation system works in the mine. That's the purpose of the access doors and the stopping, so that they could divert the air to the deepest part of the workings. What you see in front of you is called a dead chute. This is how the miners were constructing their chutes prior to mechanization hitting the mines. Once the coal was blasted free, they would load the coal onto the chute, and they would have to push it down manually by whatever means they had available to them.
Check that ladder out for it. You need to get up on your house with that, huh? Right there. That's how you go.
That was a ladder to use to climb up into these mines. And that was a bed chute
Now it's coming down.
that they would bring down from the coal down into the cars on the tracks.
A little more, please. We can get that group up there. This is where it gets exciting. You have little dynamite. You get a little dirty. Okay, this mine operated from 1860 to November 1st, 1966. This was the last gangway they were driving when this mine closed. The production of anthracite peaked at 100 million tons in 1917. 1907 saw the highest number of anthracite mine workers killed in a single year at 708. By 1914, there were over 180,000 men employed in the anthracite coal industry here in eastern Pennsylvania. After World War I, the demand for anthracite began to slowly decline as the railroads were converting from steam to diesel locomotives, and they began selling off their mining divisions. After World War II, the anthracite industry lost heavily to the oil and natural gas energies in the residential heating market. Mines began only working a few days a week. Take-home pay was small, and mine workers in the anthracite fields felt that there was no future for them here in eastern Pennsylvania other than unemployment. So a mass exodus from this region to the more industrialized states began in earnest, plunging this area into a long downward economic slide punctuated by the collapse of anthracite and the population loss. Now, as we came through the mine, it was nice and bright for the tour, but that's not the way it was in the mines. That's about as bright as it was. You add to that all the smoke from the explosives they used, and all the dust from the coal coming down the various chutes. You could see that the mine was a very, very dark and dusty environment. Anybody have any questions? Did
How could
everybody
they
get all
see, how could they see where the stuff was they're trying to get?
Like the coal?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You people just want to squirt a little bit? Sure. All right. Let me turn the light off again.
She has a question.
Okay, well, let me answer this lady's question first. All right, now we're gonna do this with dim light. We can. Now you look at the bottom there, you see how dull that is? Now we're working our way up, and you're gonna see how that gets a little shiny here where the coal is.
Yeah,
Okay, the coal has kind of like a sub-metallic finish to it.
okay.
And that's what my grandfather told me. So once you get down in the mine, you got acclimated with your eyes, and you knew where the coal was, and you knew where the rock was.
Okay, so is there a possible chance that any animals came down here in the mines?
Well, there's a lot of rats down here.
Well, besides the rats, like maybe bats, because they're not nocturnal
No,
animals.
bats wouldn't come down that far.
Aye, aye,
But they doesn't, huh?
About snakes.
No, they wouldn't have snakes down here. No, there was too much activity, and the snakes would like to, would hide. They'd probably be up on the surface where they could sun themselves on a nice, rock. But as far as the mine, no, just the rats.
Kids you wanted around it.
That-
And you wanted the rats around it, so.
Oh, yeah, there's a couple of stories. One I can tell you, there was a guy who was feeding this rat one day. Well, he fed this one rat, and he knew him because he had half of his ear chewed off in a rat fight. He said this rat used to come every day at lunchtime, he'd feed him. So one day the rats were running through the mine, and this guy was sitting taking a rest. The rat with the half chewed off ear ran up his leg and started squealing real loud.
Really?
Ran down his leg and took off. So the guy said, the rats are going, something's got to be wrong, so he got up. He walked away, he got about 40, 50 feet away, and the rock came down where he was sitting.
Wow.
And he knew this rat because he had, because of the ear. Yeah. Anybody else? No questions? Okay, we'll make our way back. We'll get up there.
Okay, let's see where we go next. Once again, there's that vertical shaft I was mentioning before. They'll send a cart down there to get people out in the event of an emergency. So you see permanent stopping there. That's where the cinder block walls are. All masoned in. And we're going back through the doors.
Wait, come on, ready?
Aluminium.
walking back the way we came, heading toward our rail car. Looks like to head back up. From what I can tell, the temperature difference from outside to down here is amazing. It's actually on the chilly side. I didn't bring a hoodie with me, but I also knew that once I went up the stairs, back up the top side again. And I want to get a close up in here. This is the office, what they call the peg room office. You kept track of everything. Here was the board. Pegs for in and pegs for out. And it's time to catch up to everybody before we get lost. It's definitely cooler down here than it is up top side, and you will get dripped on from time to time. If you're not afraid of water, you'll be good to go. But it's definitely worthwhile. This is an outstanding mine tour. I would recommend this to anybody. I give it 5 out of 5. Here's RJ again.
So the kids asking if it's dark outside.
They'll be in for a heck of a surprise now, won't he?
I said this little kid up here is asking if it's dark outside. Mom's like, no, don't have it.
Here's another close-up of the bull and the donkey, or the mule rather, excuse me. And those are the sprags they would stick in the wheels to try to slow the cars down. Now trying to catch back up to everybody else. See you in a bit.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for coming on the tour. I hope you enjoyed it. As we exit, you keep to your left. There's a huge room up there. You get in the room, get nice and warm, stay in the room till I tell you it's okay to come out. When we get the car ready, we make time to go to the service. The certificates on the table. You take your souvenir tour. If you really want to be in line, you can put your name on.
You can see coal. You can see rock. You can see timbers. The way they have this set up. Very cool.
Oh no, are we gonna have this issue again?
Here we are again. Back outside of the mine. So a little overcast, but still considerably warmer than it was when we were down in the mines itself. Gonna head over, show you a few other pieces of equipment that are here on the property. Get a close-up of the steam shovel over here. Such a beautiful location. I mean, you can just come up here and relax all day long, and it's just refreshing to be out and about. I believe the steam shovels were used in the mines, especially topside, to help out with ventilation purposes or something like that. I'm not definite, but that would be my guess. There's another train. Here you can see the workings of the unit. This is, I believe, for doing the bucket. This is for swinging it, I think, one way or the other. Something along those lines. I'm not exactly sure. Pedals for operating it. As we come down here below the tipple, you're going to see an old bulldozer and a blue Mack dump truck. You can see money standing on the ground as we go down the hill. You can see just how big the tipple is. Here's the old Mack dump truck. I want to say this is a late 40s, early 50s model. Engine is still in it, albeit loosely. A lot of stuff is missing from it. But overall appears to be fairly solid. Here's an inside look at it. See the gauges. Used to be a light green, now it's blue, brush painted. Back window smashed out of it. 10-wheeler. Love to see this thing get refurbished. That would be cool. But being what it is, as a static display piece, this probably will be for the rest of its time here. And of course, as I mentioned, the bulldozer. Apparently this is a retired unit. Still intact. Wonder if it can be made running again. One would never know. The tracks are like above my waist. Just incredible. Here you can see the truck is actually underneath where the tipple would empty into it and load the dump truck. And there's RJ and JP. Incredible stuff. Incredible stuff.